Ladies and gentlemen, today we journey into one of the most secretive and extreme places in the United States justice system. ADX Florence, often called the Alcatraz of the Rockies. This federal Supermax prison, located in Colorado, was built not for rehabilitation, but for the highest level of containment of those individuals deemed too dangerous or too high risk for any other facility. ADX Florence, officially known as the United States Penitentiary Administrative Maximum Facility, represents the highest level of security within the American federal prison system. Located in a remote area of Florence, Colorado, the prison was specifically designed to house inmates who were considered too dangerous, too influential, or too disruptive to be managed in any other correctional facility. It is classified as a Supermax prison, meaning its primary purpose is total control and containment rather than rehabilitation or social reintegration. The facility was constructed with the idea that absolute security can only be achieved through extreme isolation. Every aspect of ADX Florence's design supports this goal. The prison is built using reinforced concrete, steel, and advanced surveillance systems that minimize human interaction and prevent coordinated activity among inmates. Cells are designed to be soundproof, ensuring prisoners cannot communicate with one another, and movement within the facility is strictly regulated through remote-controlled doors and constant monitoring. ADX Florence houses inmates who have committed the most serious crimes, including terrorism, espionage, organized crime leadership, and repeated acts of extreme violence. Many of these individuals have previously assaulted prison staff, escaped from other facilities, or continued criminal operations while incarcerated elsewhere. Because of this, ADX Florence functions as the final destination within the federal prison system, where inmates are placed when all other control measures have failed. Security at ADX Florence operates on multiple layers, combining physical barriers, technology, and strict procedural controls. Guards rarely have direct contact with inmates, reducing the risk of attacks or hostage situations. Surveillance cameras, motion sensors, and controlled lighting systems track every movement, making it one of the most closely monitored environments in the world. The prison's reputation as inescapable is reinforced by the fact that no successful escape has ever been recorded. As the most secure prison in the United States, ADX Florence symbolizes the extreme end of incarceration, where the priority is not reform, but the complete neutralization of perceived threats to national security. Prison order and public safety life inside ADX Florence is defined by extreme solitary confinement, a system designed to minimize human contact and eliminate any possibility of coordinated behavior among inmates. Prisoners typically spend 23 hours a day alone in their cells, with limited interaction even with prison staff. This level of isolation is far more severe than in most maximum security prisons and is a defining feature of the Supermax model used at ADX Florence. Each inmate's cell is a small, reinforced concrete space measuring approximately 7 by 12 feet. The cell contains only the most basic necessities: a concrete bed, a thin mattress, a small desk, a stool, a sink, and a toilet that is controlled from the outside. The walls are thick and soundproof, preventing inmates from hearing or communicating with one another. Even the narrow window is designed to face the sky rather than the prison grounds, ensuring inmates cannot orient themselves or observe daily activity. The 1 hour outside the cell is usually spent in an isolated recreation area, often referred to as a recreation pen, which is essentially a small concrete enclosure with high walls and a partial opening above. In many cases, inmates exercise alone, further reinforcing the sense of isolation. Meals are delivered through slots in the cell doors, and communication with guards is minimal and strictly professional. This daily routine is repetitive and unchanging, intentionally structured to reduce stimulation and limit any opportunity for social interaction. Over time, the lack of meaningful human contact, environmental variety, and personal freedom can significantly affect an inmate's perception of time, sense of identity, and mental well-being. The routine at ADX Florence is not accidental. It is a carefully controlled system designed to maintain order and prevent violence by isolating individuals deemed most dangerous within the prison system. ADX Florence is engineered to be virtually inescapable, with every element of its design focused on total control, surveillance, and risk elimination. From its remote geographic location in the high desert of Colorado to its fortress-like construction, the prison operates as a closed system where movement, communication, and access are all tightly restricted. The facility's isolation alone serves as a natural barrier, surrounded by open land that offers no cover and makes escape attempts easy to detect and impossible to sustain. The physical structure of ADX Florence is built using reinforced concrete and steel, materials chosen specifically to withstand tampering, explosions, or forced entry. The prison is divided into multiple secure units, each operating independently to prevent large-scale disturbances. Inmates are moved through narrow corridors designed to limit visibility and orientation, ensuring they cannot learn the layout of the facility. Doors are electronically controlled from a central command center, allowing staff to manage inmate movement without direct physical contact. Security technology plays a central role in maintaining control. Hundreds of surveillance cameras monitor every hallway, cell block, and exterior perimeter at all times. Motion sensors, pressure plates, and alarm systems detect even the slightest unauthorized movement. Lighting systems are carefully controlled to maintain visibility while preventing inmates from using shadows or darkness to their advantage. Every action within the prison is logged, recorded, and reviewed, creating a constant digital record of inmate behavior. Human interaction is deliberately minimized to reduce the risk of violence or manipulation. Guards are trained to follow strict protocols, and most inmate contact occurs through solid steel doors and secure communication systems. Transfers within the prison require multiple layers of authorization, restraints, and escort procedures. Even routine activities such as medical visits or recreation involve complex security checks designed to eliminate unpredictability. The reputation of ADX Florence as an inescapable facility is reinforced by its history. No inmate has ever successfully escaped. This record is not the result of chance, but of a system where architecture, technology, procedure, and isolation work together to create one of the most secure correctional environments in the world, making escape not just unlikely, but practically impossible. ADX Florence is specifically reserved for inmates considered the most dangerous, influential, or uncontrollable within the United States federal prison system. The individuals housed there are not ordinary offenders. They include convicted terrorists, international drug cartel leaders, organized crime bosses, mass murderers, and spies whose actions pose severe threats to national security or public safety. Many of these inmates were transferred to ADX Florence after demonstrating extreme violence, escape attempts, or the ability to continue criminal operations while incarcerated in other prisons. What distinguishes these prisoners is not only the severity of their crimes, but also their capacity to influence others. Some inmates previously led criminal organizations from behind bars, ordering murders, trafficking operations, or acts of terrorism through coded messages and networks of loyal followers. ADX Florence was designed to neutralize this influence by isolating such individuals completely, cutting off their ability to communicate, organize, or exert power over others. Several high-profile inmates have contributed to the prison's global reputation, turning ADX Florence into a symbol of ultimate confinement. These include individuals convicted of major terrorist attacks, large-scale espionage against the United States, and long-standing leaders of violent criminal enterprises. Housing such figures in one facility allows the federal government to centralize its highest-risk inmates under the strictest possible security measures. Placement in ADX Florence is often viewed as the final step in the federal incarceration system. Inmates sent there are typically those who have failed to comply with rules in other maximum security prisons or who present ongoing threats regardless of location. For many, transfer to ADX Florence signifies that they're considered permanently dangerous, requiring lifelong containment rather than rehabilitation. The presence of these notorious criminals reinforces the prison's role as a containment facility rather than a correctional environment. Every policy, routine, and restriction is shaped by the need to manage individuals whose past actions demonstrate extreme levels of violence, manipulation, or ideological commitment, making ADX Florence a prison built not for reform, but for absolute control of the most feared offenders in the nation's security. At ADX Florence operates through a complex, multi-layered system designed to eliminate risk at every possible level. Rather than relying on a single form of control, the prison integrates physical barriers, advanced technology, and strict operational procedures to maintain total dominance over the environment. Each layer functions as a backup to the next, ensuring that even if one system fails, others immediately prevent any breach or threat. The outer perimeter of the prison is protected by reinforced fencing, razor wire, controlled entry points, and open buffer zones that make unauthorized approach easily visible. Access to the facility is limited to a small number of secured gates, all monitored by armed personnel and surveillance systems. These external defenses create the first line of protection, preventing escape attempts and outside interference long before they reach the main prison structures. Inside the facility, surveillance is constant and comprehensive. High-resolution cameras monitor cell blocks, corridors, recreation areas, and service zones around the clock. Motion detectors and pressure sensors track movement in restricted areas, while alarm systems are linked to a central control room that can respond instantly to any irregular activity. Even inmate cells are positioned to allow observation without direct interaction, ensuring behavior is continuously monitored. Daily operations are controlled through rigid procedures that leave little room for unpredictability. Inmate movement follows carefully timed schedules, with doors, lights, and access points operated remotely by staff. Guards rarely interact directly with inmates, reducing opportunities for violence, manipulation, or human error. Communication is formal, brief, and regulated, reinforcing a strict power structure. This constant surveillance and layered security approach create an environment where inmates are always aware they are being observed. The system is designed not only to prevent physical escape, but also to suppress misconduct, coordination, and resistance. Every detail of the prison's operation reinforces the idea that control at ADX Florence is absolute. Sustained through technology, structure, and relentless monitoring, the living conditions inside ADX Florence are intentionally stark, reflecting a design philosophy centered on control, restraint, and risk prevention. Inmate cells are constructed with minimalism in mind, removing anything that could be used to cause harm, conceal contraband, or facilitate communication. This austere environment is not incidental, but a deliberate strategy to maintain order and eliminate potential threats within the prison. Each cell is made almost entirely of poured concrete, including the bed, desk, and stool, all molded into the structure itself. This eliminates movable objects that could be turned into weapons or tools for escape. The mattress provided is thin and tightly regulated, and personal possessions are severely limited. Items such as books, writing materials, or a small television may only be granted under strict behavioral guidelines, reinforcing compliance through control privileges. The cell layout is designed to restrict sensory input and spatial awareness. Walls are thick and soundproof, preventing inmates from hearing others or engaging in verbal communication. The narrow window offers only a view of the sky, denying inmates any sense of direction or connection to the outside world. Lighting is carefully managed to allow observation while maintaining a monotonous atmosphere that reduces stimulation. Sanitation facilities are basic and controlled externally. Toilets, sinks, and water flow are regulated by prison staff to prevent misuse. Meals are delivered through secure slots in the cell door, removing the need for face-to-face interaction. Every aspect of daily living is dictated by strict routines, leaving inmates with little control over their environment. These minimalist conditions are designed to reduce violence, self-harm, and disruption, but they also create a deeply isolating and psychologically demanding experience. The absence of comfort, variety, and personal space reinforces the prison's overarching goal of absolute control, making the cell not just a place of confinement, but a tool of discipline and containment. At ADX Florence, inmate privileges are extremely limited and tightly regulated, forming a core part of the prison's control strategy. Unlike traditional prisons where inmates may participate in group activities, work programs, or educational classes, ADX Florence operates on a system where nearly every privilege must be earned and can be revoked at any time. This structure reinforces compliance by linking basic comforts to strict adherence to rules and behavioral expectations. Inmates have little to no freedom in how they spend their time. Access to reading materials, television, or writing supplies is granted only after long periods of good behavior and can vary depending on the security level assigned to each prisoner. Even when permitted, these privileges are closely monitored, with content often restricted to prevent coded communication or ideological reinforcement. Any misuse can result in immediate loss of access. Recreation time is minimal and highly controlled. When allowed out of their cells, inmates are escorted individually to isolated exercise areas, ensuring they never interact with one another. Physical activity is limited to basic exercises, and outdoor exposure is often confined to small, enclosed spaces. This approach eliminates the possibility of group dynamics, alliances, or confrontations developing among prisoners. Communication with the outside world is also heavily restricted. Phone calls, mail, and visits are rare and subject to strict screening and monitoring. Contact with family members or legal representatives follows rigid protocols, with conversations often recorded or observed. These limitations are designed to prevent inmates from maintaining influence beyond prison walls or coordinating illegal activity. The privilege system at ADX Florence functions as both a management tool and a behavioral incentive. By controlling access to even the smallest comforts, prison authorities maintain psychological dominance while reinforcing the facility's purpose of total containment. Daily life becomes a test of endurance and compliance, where routine, restriction, and regulation define every moment of existence. Long-term isolation at ADX Florence has profound psychological consequences, making mental health one of the most debated aspects of the facility. Inmates confined to solitary cells for months or years experience extreme sensory deprivation and a lack of meaningful human interaction, conditions that challenge the fundamental social nature of the human mind. This environment is not temporary for many prisoners. For some, isolation becomes a permanent state of existence. The absence of regular social contact can distort an inmate's perception of time, reality, and self-identity. Without normal conversations, physical presence of others, or environmental variety, prisoners may struggle to maintain cognitive clarity. Reports and psychological studies have linked prolonged solitary confinement to symptoms such as anxiety, depression, paranoia, hallucinations, emotional numbness, and difficulty concentrating. These effects often intensify the longer an individual remains isolated. Routine at ADX Florence further compounds psychological strain. Days are highly repetitive, with little variation to mark the passage of time. The lack of personal control over basic decisions, when to eat, sleep, or move, can create feelings of helplessness and powerlessness. Over time, this can erode an inmate's sense of agency and resilience, making reintegration into any form of social environment increasingly difficult. While mental health services are technically available, access is limited and often conducted through cell doors or brief interactions. Critics argue that treatment under such conditions is insufficient to counteract the psychological damage caused by extreme isolation. Even inmates with no prior history of mental illness may develop serious psychological symptoms after extended confinement. The psychological impact of long-term isolation is one of the most controversial aspects of ADX Florence, raising questions about the balance between security and mental well-being. The prison's reliance on isolation as a control mechanism places immense strain on the human mind, making psychological survival as challenging as physical confinement. The extreme conditions at ADX Florence have long raised significant human rights concerns and ethical debates regarding the treatment of inmates in the United States. Critics argue that prolonged solitary confinement, minimal social contact, and austere living conditions may constitute cruel and unusual punishment, challenging fundamental principles of justice and human dignity. Legal scholars, human rights organizations, and mental health professionals have repeatedly highlighted that the psychological and physical impacts of long-term isolation may exceed what many consider morally or ethically acceptable. One of the primary concerns revolved around the use of solitary confinement for indefinite periods. At ADX Florence, some inmates remain isolated for decades, with only minimal opportunities for interaction or recreation. This raises ethical questions about whether the practice violates constitutional protections against inhumane treatment, particularly when prisoners are not given clear criteria for release or reintegration into less restrictive environments. The debate extends to whether extreme isolation can ever be justified as a preventive measure when it leads to severe psychological harm. Human rights advocates also scrutinize the lack of meaningful rehabilitation programs within the facility. Unlike other prisons that offer education, vocational training, or counseling, ADX Florence focuses almost entirely on containment and risk reduction. While this may ensure public safety and prevent violence within the prison, critics argue that it effectively ignores the potential for personal growth or reform, creating a system that punishes individuals beyond their criminal acts. Transparency and accountability are additional ethical concerns. Because ADX Florence operates under high security and secrecy, independent monitoring is limited, making it difficult to assess the full scope of living conditions and treatment of inmates. This lack of oversight fuels suspicions that the extreme measures employed may cross ethical boundaries, particularly when the consequences on mental health and human dignity are considered. The debates surrounding ADX Florence reflect a broader tension in the criminal justice system. The need to protect society from dangerous individuals versus the moral obligation to treat all humans, regardless of their crimes, with fairness and humanity. These discussions continue to shape legal challenges, advocacy efforts, and public perception of Supermax prisons, raising difficult questions about how far society should go in the name of security and control. The existence and operation of ADX Florence extend beyond questions of security and containment. They raise profound ethical and societal considerations about the role of the criminal justice system and the limits of state power. As the nation's most secure Supermax prison, ADX Florence embodies the tension between protecting society from dangerous individuals and upholding the principles of human rights, dignity, and fairness that form the foundation of a just legal system. One of the central societal questions is whether the extreme conditions of confinement, such as near-total isolation, sensory deprivation, and strict control over daily life, achieve justice or simply exact punishment. By prioritizing absolute security over rehabilitation, ADX Florence challenges the balance between safety and humanity, prompting reflection on what constitutes a fair and moral response to crime. For many, the prison represents the endpoint of punitive measures, where the state exerts maximum authority over individuals deemed irredeemable, raising concerns about the ethics of indefinite and severe confinement. The psychological and physical impact of long-term isolation also carries broader implications for society. Mental health experts warn that prolonged solitary confinement can cause lasting damage, not only to inmates' well-being, but also to their potential for reintegration should they ever leave the facility. This raises questions about the societal costs of extreme imprisonment, including the perpetuation of trauma, potential future criminal behavior, and the ethical responsibility of the state to mitigate harm even when managing dangerous populations. ADX Florence also serves as a focal point for debates on human rights at a national and international level. Organizations and observers examine the prison as a case study in how democratic societies handle high-risk individuals, balancing security imperatives with obligations to prevent inhumane treatment. The facility's practices invite scrutiny of legal frameworks, accountability mechanisms, and the ethical boundaries of punishment, forcing society to confront whether there is a limit to how far the state should go in controlling human behavior. Furthermore, ADX Florence reflects broader societal attitudes toward crime, punishment, and deterrence. Its existence raises questions about the message it sends regarding justice, the treatment of offenders, and the values that underpin the legal system. By isolating and strictly controlling the most dangerous criminals, the prison may fulfill immediate security goals, but also challenges society to examine the moral and ethical dimensions of power, authority, and the human cost of maintaining absolute control over others. In conclusion, ADX Florence stands as a stark testament to the extremes of the American prison system, a place where security, control, and containment take precedence over rehabilitation, comfort, or human connection. It forces us to confront difficult questions about justice, ethics, and the cost of safety. While the facility protects society from some of its most dangerous individuals, it also challenges us to consider the human consequences of such confinement and whether a balance can ever truly be struck between security and humanity. Ultimately, ADX Florence is more than a prison. It is a mirror reflecting our society's deepest fears, values, and moral dilemmas.